Today, we're going to be discussing systemic inequality in trade, and we'll be recording today's session. Earlier this year, we released a report on the invisible women in the cocoa sector in West Africa. The report showed that on average, cocoa farmers earn only 74p a day, and that figure is often much lower for women. Women do the majority of the work involved in cocoa farming, on top of all of their caring responsibilities, cleaning, cooking, childcare. Women are working on average 30% more hours a day than men. And that's including the physically demanding jobs of pruning trees, caring for plants, and so on. But they don't receive the benefits of the sales, and most are not landowners themselves. Today, we're going to talk about gender and racial inequality in trade, not just in cocoa, but across the board, and about what individuals and businesses can do about it. I'm joined by two knowledgeable and incredible speakers. Anne-Marie Yao, Fairtrade Africa's cocoa lead, who has worked extensively with cocoa farmers and their communities in West Africa, including with the Women's School of Leadership, which she'll talk more about. And the incredible Dr. Shola Mosh-Shubamemu, a leading activist and thinker on anti-racism, feminism, and intersectionality. I'm going to ask both our speakers some questions. We're going to have a discussion. We're going to get into it. But I really welcome questions from you all, so please do join in by typing in your questions. We're also going to pose a few poll questions to get your thoughts as our conversation progresses. And to get us started, you're going to see the first one pop up right now. Jacob, please, the first poll question. Thank you. So while you're filling in your responses, I'm going to ask Anne-Marie my first question. Anne-Marie, part of our strategy at Fairtrade is to support the women cocoa farmers in particular. You've done a lot of work on gender inequality in cocoa growing communities. Could you tell us a bit about the lives of women cocoa farmers in Ivory Coast and Ghana? You're on mute at the moment. You need to click your little mute button so we can hear you. Can you find it? It's on the bottom. There you go.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you for the opportunity. And yes, of course, I'm glad to be here today, and I would like to appreciate the organizer for the opportunity. And of course, we Fairtrade believe the role of women in agriculture need more visibility, recognition, and value. And that gender equity is important to social sustainability. And reference to the SDGs, we all agree that it's a fact. So for the audience, it's good maybe to talk about our context in West Africa. And I want you to know that in West Africa, cocoa production is characterized by a very high share of smallholders, with small average 6 hectares, while the average in Côte d'Ivoire is 3 hectares. And this need to feed approximately 5 people to 10. Furthermore, our cocoa production population is aging. And then, of course, when we have old farmers, the children want to take over the family farm because they also want to build their own family. So in this context, and considering our social and traditional norm, everything it's become a lot of pressure for women to take over the cocoa production. And in addition to that, women don't have access to land in our region because of this social norm, but because also they lack money to buy their own land. So they can't own cocoa plantation. What prevents them of being part of a cooperative? Currently, cooperative is the entry point for them to have more incentive. It's bring positive change by introducing gender strategies, promote women involvement in implementation of projects and activity that can develop their skills, ownership, and also have this economic development we seek for. So this situation is even worsened by the low literacy of women, the lack of information and skill, and of course, this difficult access to finance. When you consider all this situation and all this frame that I'm presenting, it's clear that we don't have a position in the community as a woman, rural women especially, and then it's become very difficult for women to have a say and be part of the decision making in terms of management of communities and cooperatives.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Shola, Anne-Marie's talks then about some of the barriers that face women. It's not just low incomes, it's access to claiming their rights. Do you see this injustice as part of a bigger problem? And do you think we're right when we call this systemic inequality?
I think you're absolutely spot on. This is systemic inequality. Look at it this way. The women are experiencing structural inequality at a macro level and at a micro level. So let's look at the micro level first of all. The systems, cultural and legal, are steeped in patriarchy in the sense that female cocoa farmers do not have access to land rights, they do not have access to finance, so they do not have collateral like men would have to be able to secure financing, right? Those are very visible barriers, even though they are the primary caregivers and the primary providers. Micro level, I can imagine how suffocating that must be, to having to juggle and deal with all that multiple inequality right on their doorstep. And then you add to what Anne-Marie said about their literacy. Now, the literacy, I don't think that means that they are not intelligent, astute women. You can see that they are intelligent, astute women in spite of the minimal education they may have. So imagine how much more they would achieve if the educational system and the access to finance and all that was equal in the respective countries. Then at the macro level, the Fair Trade She Deserves campaign, one of the things you revealed there was how the average female cocoa farmer earns 23 pence a day. That was enough to just get, that got my blood boiling, because when you bear in mind that the UK chocolate industry itself earns about 4 billion a year. Please, somebody explain to me how the person who does the actual work gets 23p a day. There is massive inequality. And what I don't see here is how there is not as much outrage about this as there is for the fashion industry with the garment workers and the sweatshops. This is the equivalent of it, right? It is absolutely the equivalent. And you have people harassing Nike, harassing all these fast fashion companies and making them change their policies, because what they've been doing is to foster a low-skilled labor force who are working in incredibly dire circumstances, and they're barely able to provide for themselves. This is exactly what is happening in the cocoa industry. And the fact that people are forgetting the women who actually are sustainability to this industry, and treating them as they've always treated women, like we are less than second-class citizens, like we are less than inferior. That is something that must change. That is structural inequality, macro level and micro level.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shola. And I think your point around the role of the agency of women here versus the structural inequality is something that we think about a lot. One of the initiatives that Anne-Marie has really been pioneering is the Women's School of Leadership. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit more about that, Anne-Marie, because in terms of solutions, it is one, but it'd be interesting to hear about what you've seen there, but also what you think the limitations might be of that approach.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Of course, I'm so glad to talk about what we have achieved so far. The Fair Trade Africa Women's School of Leadership is part of our gender strategy, our 2016 to 2020 strategy, which aim to achieve equality of opportunities and access to benefit for all, men and women. And then our main tool is a premium. So the overall goal is to establish a roadmap for achieving gender equity in the value chain for all fair trade products. But we start the pilot with the cocoa farmers because of the challenges we are facing and how the gap is so huge to fill. So the program aims to improve participant core competencies in leadership. It's also a means for them to understand their rights, give them this insurance to talk for themselves and stand for what they believe and what they think they deserve, and also take control and manage resources while they receive support from us I think we already mentioned it, is this access of information. They need to know where is the power and go for this power. And this come with knowledge, skills. And then after that, they realize their own potential and decide to take a role, to take a step. And so the focus is on trainings, first of all, but after the training, we come on coaching, help them to also look at around, see the rolling models and try to do the same thing, to try to achieve, like seeing someone like Dr. Chola or Anne-Marie or Catherine and say, okay, this woman is at that level, I think I can also, and I want to work on my own strength and also influence the community. So this training also integrates men participation. We want to have them with us as gender sensitive and ambassadors to help us strengthen women's position in the community, because this is key. It's key to strengthen their position in the community, change the way that the community can see women in power, in position, in this leadership role, and accept these women at this position because we have the capacity. And then through the program, we also work on their entrepreneurship skills. After 1 year of building their capacity, moving something in, developing this power in, we then support them with income generating activity when they will now come experiences their own knowledge, their capacity to negotiate and move mountain. And at this moment, you will see this woman shining. And then, of course, the household is better, the community is happy seeing these women succeeding. This is more or less what we are doing with the Women's School of Leadership. And so far, I'm so happy with the results. Wonderful.
Yeah, and congratulations to you, because we saw the latest cohort graduate this week. Shola, one of the things that we're interested in is this kind of money power nexus. So where do you think we should start? And maybe this is an impossible question, but if we're looking to change the trade system, money, power, where do we start?
Oh, we need to change the power structure. And I mean, take the power. People, I'm done with asking for permission or being nice about it, because there are people really suffering out there. And, you know, sometimes it is you being hungry that creates the opportunity for you to step up and say enough is enough. The power structure needs to change. The patriarchy, the system of the patriarchy, where culturally, for instance, land is passed down from father to son, not father to wife or to daughter. That's a problem right there. And there are not enough women being empowered, financially empowered, because as far as I'm concerned, all women are empowered. Okay, I'm not looking for anybody to come empowered. We are empowered, but we need to have that financial accessibility in order to own land. So they need to own their own land. They need to be able to have, if they don't have land for collateral, what else that can they use for collateral? Because clearly what is traditional would not work for them. So that means businesses, banks need to think outside the box and okay, what can we use as an alternative collateral in order to be able to fund your business? It also means investing in women, investing not just in the idea, but investing in what they've already demonstrated. I mean, a lot of these women are doing this business, they've been doing this business for years, but yet, because nobody has put it down on a proper, I don't know, business plan, and it doesn't have all the Excel spreadsheet, there are no commas or dots, is then canceled. That's nonsense. That is actually a missed opportunity. If these women represent a proportion of human resources, they're not being tapped into. That to me does not make any sense. The power structure needs to change. And I'm sure that there are women who are stepping into that power structure, just not enough. And that there are women stepping into the power structure, but they're dealing with so many barriers at where they've reached that it's not enough to trickle down, which means that as a society, both within these countries and outside the country, we need to fight this at a macro level, okay? So just as I mentioned earlier about, companies, whether it's Cadbury or any of the other ones, we need to ensure that their practices trickles down to those that are doing the work. So for instance, when we talk about diversity and inclusion policies, right, one of the things we say is that, before I employ your company, I want you to ensure that you've got those number of women on your board. That's one. Two, I want to see how you are engaging promotion, or who you engage to supply you with services. The same thing should be done with all of this chocolate industry, corporations, where we say as a people, if you want my money to buy, your product, this is what I expect from you. And I think that is what would also help to change the conversation and the narrative for the women. What Anne-Marie is doing is incredible, because that they most definitely need at that micro level and at the local level, because there's a game being played here. It's called the power game. Now, and as resilient as these women are, as intelligent as they are, they're business savvy. They need to be able to adapt to the business structures. Not when I say structures, I mean the way the power structure plays. That's why when you are teaching them about how to negotiate, negotiating, as you know, is not only having the confidence to say, this is what I want, but is you having the knowledge of what you want. Is you understanding how to benchmark your worth with your competitors. How do you do that? Now, not everybody is born with that knowledge. That is why they need to have that, they need to have that education. So they now understand, this is how I scale up. Because I already have what I need in terms of, I have the resilience, I have the fortitude to run this business. But there are other things I do not know. Now, once I have this information, I need other things in the system to work for me, which is where Anne-Marie comes in. And then we have to come in from the other side, just like Fair Trade is doing, which is highlighting the issue and saying the power structure needs to change. The patriarchy thing needs to break the heck down. The political structures needs to start speaking for these women, or don't vote them into power. People, okay? If someone's not going to represent the money that goes into your pocket, what goddamn are you putting them in office for? Let me stop now.
Yeah. Well, I love the way you've articulated that, because it's not just, there's a kind of ethical question, there's a rights question, but there's also the business case that you point to, right? So I'm gonna move us into that territory a bit. And the first poll that we just did, about half of the people listening to this webinar think that their business takes inequality in the supply chain very seriously. So that's an interesting thing. I'm going to launch the second poll now, please, Jacob, because we're going to talk a bit about responsibility for reducing, attacking, dismantling this systemic inequality and who that sits with. And Anne-Marie, to come to you while people are filling that in, what role do you think businesses in the UK can play, or what role do you require them to play in addressing systemic inequality in supply chains?
Okay, before talking about the role, I want them to know and have it as a takeaway that in rural West Africa, women are in charge of their family well-being. They play a critical role in contributing to the livelihood and a vibrant community. So if I'm serious about living income, I'm serious about fighting against child labor, women could really make a change in implementing sustainable practices with regard to this fight against child labor and sustainable farm practices. I think it's a main reason to have women involved. Then all of us, companies, industry, certification scheme, should encourage by businesses in their relationship with the supply chain actor to have a gender, let's say, strategy. It should be like part of the requirement. A gender equality in supply chain should be a social responsibility requirement, a business imperative. This is the first thing. And then the second thing should be for us, then as Shola mentioned earlier, to give this mean to women. They need to have access to finance. They are already managing, they are rolling their families, doing their small businesses, going on the bush, collecting wood, everything they can to be able to put the food on the table. They are very well structured in their head. They know exactly what is needed for their family. So this is something that we need to explore. We are not exploring this power that women have in their hand. And they wake up in the morning with it, they sleep in the evening with that, and they are like expecting people to come and support. But everything is focused in men. Those men are having the resources, nothing is shared with the youth, nothing is shared with the women, and they have to struggle to be able to put the food on the table. If we are serious about food security, women should be our target. And then finally, business can support strengthening. Shola said already, we have the capacity. We know exactly what is good for our kids and our husband and the community and even the society. Now we need to know where is the right information. How can we go to this information? How can we transfer this information into practical action to be able to have tailored program to motivate those women? And of course, we don't have it enough strong in Africa. These NGOs, can we have NGOs focus on women coming on board and support, and then structure these women to achieve this noble work? Without women, we will not be able to achieve sustainability. As far as rural Africa is concerned, we need to have women on board. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm going to continue with a similar question, which is, where do you think responsibility lies for changing the current trade system with business, citizens, like governments? Who do you want to be, who do you see as responsible for making this change happen?
So I think we women are ready, our women are ready. So responsibility lies with companies. Can they at least think about us? It seems like we are not part of their program. Can they include women in their program? And being very serious. I mean, really put something on the table, enough access to finance, and then give us the capacity even to access bank for women. Is difficult. They don't have anything. They don't have access to lend, nothing. How can I go to a bank and borrow money? So we need to have structures supporting women. So there is something for government as well, then the NGOs and the companies, because we are weak. We don't have this financial power to be able to develop our entrepreneurship skills. This is where we need support.
Okay.
And so,
yeah. So just to add to that, I think first of all, let us understand that there are different levels of responsibility. There's a moral responsibility which every single one of us bears. So that's every single one of us on this call, every single one of us that understands that inequality is, quite frankly, is injustice, and it's unacceptable. Then there's a responsibility that the women themselves have, which we can already see they're delivering on. And they're doing, not only are they doing their best, they're going over and beyond with a stark volume of barriers. What I would hate to happen is for a woman to have to choose between feeding her children and sending them to school. Or if she has to choose between which child should go to school because of the limited resources she has, or she has to think about, well, I can't scale up my business right now because my capital is so little, I will not have enough for my family or to even to be able to provide for other things that she needs to provide for. That's one part. Then corporations, as we said earlier, and governments, NGOs, as well as private funding. I think it's all well and good for governments. Governments have to be involved. And for me, that's even a simple thing in terms of having government involved. It's important for citizens to give the government, this is the mandate I expect from you if you want me to vote for you. Do you see what I mean? And then you hold them to account to that. Then you have those who are private investors and NGOs. Now, it's not enough for NGOs to come and talk. Anne-Marie, am I right? We don't have time for talk because talk is cheap. We don't have time for that. Everyone is talking. It's time to do. We want you to show up with the money. We want you to show up with the financial and capital structure that will help the women scale up in business. The patriarchy has been there since time immemorial. It's going to take some time to break it down. And while that is being chipped at, wherever it is we can get to, the women need to thrive. So when people go, well, wait your turn. I don't know about you, but it took women 100 years in the United Kingdom to get the right to vote. Do I look like I have 100 years? Do these cocoa women look like they have 100 years for men to finally get it into their, God bless them, their heads, and the system to get, to be dismantled? We don't have that time. But all of these changes need to be happening in parallel. And the consumers, you have a choice. You absolutely have a choice. And this actually means being conscious. So, for instance, my daughter loves Cadbury's Dairy Milk and Cadbury's Celebrations. I particularly like the one with hazelnuts. It's very crunchy, right? Now, if I am serious about what I'm talking about, I should be asking Cadbury, and I should look up their business practices. I look up what plans and practices they have with their suppliers. And I should even go a step further. I should talk about it. And I should also send them letters like people do and say, I care about this. Can you tell me what steps you are taking? What is your corporate social responsibility to these cocoa farmers, these female cocoa farmers? Because this is not going to be the first time you're hearing about it. These are the kind of things that we can take as consumers, the kind of steps we should take as citizens with our rights to vote, and what we can do as organizations. You know, they're going to be representatives from, you know, different organizations that might be watching this. I think it is your job, if your organization is involved in this industry, to say, okay, what can we do? Are you an organization that invests, right? How can we get in touch with Anne Marie and work with her, with her initiative to make it work? Is it how we interact with the governments of Ghana and the governments of Côte d'Ivoire? What can we do to ensure that this becomes priority on the list? Because when it comes to change, I find in my experience that unless you hit them where it hurts, which is money, they're not paying attention. They are not paying attention. Reputational risk and money. Reputation equals to loss of money. You need to hit them where it hurts. And that means talking about how your relationship with government, your relationship with businesses, supply businesses, your relationship with the industry will be impacted by their own choices. So their corporate responsibility, choice or decisions and initiatives with this women. What are you doing for the women on the ground? They have power, but you and I have power too, and that power is to demand that change.
Thank you so much. And the audience poll, I think, confirms what you're saying, which is government's clearly really important here, but of course we own them too, right? So we have a role in shaping their agenda. I'm going to take a question now from the audience, and please do keep adding your questions if you have things to ask. So there's a couple of questions around the role of cooperatives, Anne Marie, and whether cooperatives, which are very common in cocoa farming communities in West Africa, are part of the solution, or whether actually they maybe make the problem of female ownership worse. So is ownership the end goal for women? Is cooperative membership the end goal for women? And what role do you see cooperatives playing?
I think cooperative could be part of the solution if women own farms. Unfortunately, most of them don't own farms, so they are not even part of the cooperatives. But those who are part of the cooperative need to also understand that they have a role, as Shula said earlier, as a woman, to also back other women in the trip. And it's also another point of action that we are implementing with the cooperative, of having this gender strategy with them. They have their gender policy to make sure that they have some action plan to encourage women to join when it's possible. But I think cooperative is a solution. But is it one thing to be part of the cooperative and another thing to be part of the decision making. So this is where the cooperative also need to understand that we don't want women to be like flowers in their cooperative. We want them to be in the table, taking the decision and influencing favorable. This is where we can maybe increase the membership of women in their communities. If women are in this kind of position, influencing the community, certainly the number of women that will be adhering and becoming member of the corporate will increase. So this is a kind of talk that we are having with the cooperative, and they are open to it. They really understand the challenge, and they are already contributing. Yeah,
which is already an incredible achievement.
Yes, and it's one of the reasons why we have these men part of the Women's School of Leadership. Those men sit at the board level in all the cooperative, and their role in the board is to make their peers understand how they need to have women sitting in the board, but taking decision. We don't want women being in the board because it looks nice to have a female presence in the room. No, we want women taking decision, influencing, making changes. Yeah.
And Shola, we've talked a lot about feminism and women here, which is of course the key dimension. But many of our current supply chains, and cocoa being one of them, trace back directly to colonial exploitation, and they're built on its legacy. Mm-hmm. Do you think or hope that the Black Lives Matter movement could change that dimension or challenge that aspect of trade?
I think that the dimensions that the Black Lives Matter addresses, it's really more about systemic racism to Black people as a race. And for me, that speaks to the structural inequalities between Black and white people, and also between Black and white nations. So when people talk today about, well, you know, all of these Anglophone and Francophone countries, they got their independence how many years ago? I'm like, how, people, you need to stop your ignorance, because a lot of the economic relationships that exist today are on the bandwagon of the pre-colonial or the pre-independence economic agreements. Okay, so it's just been following through from that. And I think it's important for people to understand that the legacy of colonialism, of imperialism and slavery, we are still feeling that impact today. Now, is that for the Black Lives Matter movement to deal with? Would that speak directly to the trade? No, I don't think so, because that deals with a much bigger, question around the treatment, so the dehumanization of the Black identity. So, you know, how some white people, Black people, but it's not just people, it's the institutional racism, okay, and how that impacts the lives and equal value of liberty for Black people. What we're talking about here requires almost like its own protest. It needs its own specific, concise, on point, or it would get lost in all of the other nuances that people are trying to drive here. So Black Lives Matter, yes, talks about, you know, the breach of our human rights, talks about police brutality, talks about microaggressions, all of these different issues. But for these women, now I know that African women are not new to getting up, getting our wrappers around our waist, marching down, whatever the heck we need to do, we get it done. We need more of those protests out there from our women, including our men. Because like Anne-Marie mentioned earlier, they are our allies, they are our brothers, our fathers, they are our, you know, our friends, but they have to be part of the solution to dismantling the patriarchy system. Like I said, you know, when I said earlier about, imagine a woman having to make a decision between which child to send to school. And if the woman has a son and a daughter, you know, most likely it's the son she will send to school because of the way culture is. But the daughter might be the smarter one, but because of the way society runs, she say, okay, let me put the money on his own education, and then it will be his responsibility to help everybody else. But all you're having is a vicious cycle, because the girl is not being the same opportunity. So if we all step up to the plate, I don't care what kind of protest it is, but for this particular one, it needs its own, like, you know, tunnel vision. This is what we have to achieve here. And, you know, and I would say to Anne-Marie and other women like Anne-Marie that are trying to really deal with the change from, you know, grassroots up. One of the things that I find is absolutely necessary when we're engaging with the government is to have your low-hanging fruits. You know that they cannot give you everything you want. So what is the minimal you need for 2020? What's the minimal you need for 2021? And there is how we're going to start to chip at that block of the patriarchy. That's how we start to chip at how other things are prioritized over these female cocoa farmers. But that's what we need to do. And it also means that building relationships. So for instance, Anne-Marie and Fairtrade, you're doing a lot of work around this, and I'm sure you know, with all your different campaigns, you bring women like Anne-Marie to the forefront. We need more women like Anne-Marie brought to the forefront. We need people, you know, women like Anne-Marie speaking at the United Nations. These are the women who know what the heck they're talking about, not somebody reading off a report. Somebody who can give, you know, like, this is what is happening on the ground. This is what I'm already doing. This is what I need you to do. And we need to stop asking them, okay, so what can you do for me? That's nonsense. I find you get nothing done if you're asking people what they can do for you. You need to tell them what you want from them. Like, this is what we need. Here's the structural plan. Here's what you need to do. Are you going to do it or not? I mean, by all means, I'm happy to come and, come and shout at them if you need me to. But the point is, some of this does require us to be, look, I'm feeling very passionate about this. And I'm not a cocoa farmer. Can you imagine what these women are experiencing? I don't even think they can, I don't think they're even thinking about their own exhaustion because they've got so much to do. But why are we running them to the ground when they should have room and time to laugh and joke and enjoy life? But instead, we are piling on more and more pressure on them. It's wrong. And that is a direct legacy of colonialism, of the patriarchy. And they are bearing the brunt of this. They must no longer do this. They must no longer be allowed to bear this alone, because that's what's been happening. It's not their fault, because as far as I can see, they're doing everything that they can. And it's time for all of us to take our responsibility in getting them out of this, this system that is so structural, so visible and invincible to the eye, that you can't see how much it's actually impacting people's lives negatively. I applaud them. God bless them. But 23p a day? Heck no. Absolutely. I mean, the global poverty line, I think it's £1.40. Where's the explanation? I'm going to stop now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shola. And we are almost out of time. So we're going to wrap up, Anne-Marie, and I'm going to come to you for for a final, because to Shola's point, please, I think to end today with what you think the women that you work with would want to say to us and this audience feels like the right thing. And I just need to say that there are some amazing questions coming in that we're not going to have time for today, and particularly one about the role of tax and the need to hold multinationals accountable for that. So I'm sorry we've not got to that question today, but we will answer it in a follow-up. So we will publish some thinking about that too, because I think that's a great question amongst others. But to wrap up today, Anne-Marie, maybe you could bring us home and just tell us, from the women cocoa farmers that you work with, what they would want to say here. This is their platform.
Anne-Marie's smiling.
Anne-Marie's smiling. Can you give us some words, Anne-Marie? Are you okay? Can you hear us?
I think that
maybe we lost Anne-Marie just at the end. So Shola, maybe back to you then. Give us the action. What do you want us to do? One last thing.
I want us to start to hold each other accountable and hold organizations and our own governments accountable. There is, chocolate industry in every country you can think of. I'm based in the United Kingdom. I think that it's important for us to be conscious about the changes we want to see that affects these women, and what can we personally do, and who do you know? Perhaps some of the things that you're learning today, you might have contacts of people who are already engaged in this field, and you say, were you aware? So I think share the information and join at the cause for change for them, but don't let it just be words. From now on, when you buy chocolate, think about the female cocoa farmers in West Africa.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. Get in touch with us if you'd like to find out more about our work and to connect with Anne-Marie. And please join me in thanking our amazing speakers who have educated and inspired us. Keep an eye on our LinkedIn and our newsletter for further follow-up and information. Goodbye, and let's get acting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.